there is a fascist element in the United States that is becoming stronger, is becoming more powerful, and is organizing in a whole variety of ways. It's shocking, you know. And then when you look at Howard Beach, when you look at what happened in Forsyth, Georgia, when you look at what's going on in some of the colleges, from Amherst to Michigan. I mean, you sit here in Cuba and you say, God doggone, I don't want to curse on television, but damn, it's frightening. You know, it really is frightening.
The woman you have just heard is Assata Shakur. She is a self-proclaimed revolutionary now exiled in Cuba after escaping from prison and a life sentence for murdering a New Jersey state trooper. Once one of the most wanted women in police and FBI history, the name Assata Shakur has been in the news frequently as she has just published her autobiography through Westport publisher Lawrence Hill. To my left, discussing this case, is Lennox Hill. He is one of Assata's attorneys, and he wrote the foreword in her autobiography. And then to his side is Shirley Cloyes. She is the editor of the book at Lawrence Hill. Nice to have you both on the show.
Pleasure is mine.
Thank you.
Very interesting case we have here. Shirley, maybe you could answer the question, why is Assata's autobiography important? Why should I go to the bookstore and want to pick up and read this book?
I think the reason that most Americans should go to the bookstore and read Assata's autobiography is that most of us have been affected by or were involved in the events of the late 60s and 70s about which she writes. And one of the strengths of the book is that Assata writes very consciously as a survivor of this period. It was a period in which many people died or disappeared. Either they were imprisoned or assassinated for their political beliefs, or died in Vietnam, or overdosed on drugs. It's a decisive period in the life of our nation. So in giving us her autobiography, she's not only told us about her story, she's also told us something important about ourselves.
Well, many people would be saying at home, but why should I buy the book of a person who's been convicted of murdering a state trooper? Lennox, why don't you review the case? What exactly happened the night on the New Jersey State
First of all, I think that Assata was a victim of the counterintelligence program of the FBI started by J. Edgar Hoover and admittedly targeting blacks and black leaders between 1967 and 1971. And I think that because of her avowed membership in the Black Panther Party and the fact that she was a political activist in that period, she became targeted. Within the intelligence community in the United States, blacks who were members of certain organizations were considered to be dangerous, and as such, she was targeted. The directive of the FBI was to arrest these individuals on all conceivable charges until they couldn't make bail. And she was framed up on at least half a dozen charges, none of which she was convicted of prior to the incident on the Turnpike, which occurred in 1973.
However, now, what happened on the Turnpike actually took place. She wasn't framed in that situation of the shooting of the state trooper.
We contend that she was. We contend that she did not kill that state trooper, and there is not one scintilla of evidence to suggest that she did. In fact, the evidence is to the contrary. She and two companions were traveling south of the New Jersey Turnpike when they were stopped by a state trooper. The state trooper approached their car and asked the driver to exit the car. He exited the car. He called for a backup from another state trooper who appeared on the scene. While the driver was out of the car and Assata Shakur was in the passenger side in the front seat, the other state trooper approached the car, and he said in his testimony that he thought that someone would begin shooting. And there were shots fired from the inside of the car, he says. He returned the fire, in which he emptied his revolver, killing the passenger in the back seat and wounding Assata Shakur, shattering the clavicle in her shoulder and immobilizing her right hand. Now, at that time, the other state trooper, Foster, was locked in hand-to-hand deadly combat with the driver. And unquestionably, the driver killed Foster with his own gun. And
so, well, let's establish this point. it has been brought out that he actually did kill the trooper.
Oh, there's no doubt about it.
There's no doubt about that at all.
And his defense was self-defense. He said he killed him in self-defense. At his trial, that is the driver of the car, Cloyes, Sundiata Acoli, at his trial, the state admitted that it was impossible for Assata Shakur to have, in fact, fired the gun. But yet she was, at her trial, she was tried as an accessory, as an aider and an abettor.
Right, and in the state of New Jersey now, though, if you were...
That carries the same penalty as the principal. And so she has been labeled as a mad dog killer, as a cop killer, when there is no evidence that she, in fact, killed anyone.
The thing that bothered me, in her book, she wrote what she called the letter to her people.
Yes.
She never really came out and denied the fact that she was involved in this shooting of this police officer. And to me, if I were involved in a situation like that, that would be the first thing that I would say. I did not shoot this police officer. I want you to know I did not shoot this police officer.
She had no remorse with respect to the officer dying. She had no remorse about that
whatsoever.
Okay. She said she was innocent of the crimes of which she was charged. Her co-defendant, Sundiata Acoli, also said that he was not guilty of murder, but he admitted that he killed the state trooper in self-defense. Assata Shakur took the position that she was framed on the charge. She was convicted by the hysteria in Middlesex County, New Jersey, by an all-white jury, and it was impossible for her to receive a fair trial. And when you look at the conditions of her confinement, and I went into the federal courts all the way up to the Third Circuit Court of Appeals arguing of the unconstitutional treatment of this woman, being held for over 1 year in solitary confinement and not being able to see another, having any human contact.
Shirley, do you feel that her approach to this has been too extreme? Do you think that she has helped what she calls the so-called revolution, or to get rid of racism in the United States? Do you think that she has helped that by becoming so extreme in her beliefs? I mean, she openly admits that one way to achieve this revolution is through armed struggle. Violence is one way that she and the other people who want to get rid of racism in the United States, they feel that's one way to do it.
Let me just respond a bit. Assata Shakur is a product of America. She is a product of America as Martin Luther King is a product of America. She's a product of America as Martin Delaney was a product of America. The question of what is the legitimate response to racial violence and racial oppression in the United States. Jesse Jackson has a program, and he is talking about electoral politics. There are those individuals, and you look at Assata Shakur, coming out of a middle-class family, who felt driven to violence as a valid and only recourse. Now, I am not supporting that proposition necessarily, but I'm saying that it is a valid response to a history of violence.
Do you think? But do you think that's actually a valid response to shoot to arms and guns and shooting people? Is a valid response?
A valid response, obviously, self-defense. Self-defense is a valid and legitimate justification for violence upon you. There is you are under no duty to sit back in detached objectivity if someone has an uplifted knife over your head. You have every right to fight back and defend yourself and to kill if necessary. I mean, that is the law within these United States. And there is a principle that says that if people have been oppressed, they ought to be able to fight that oppression, and by violence if necessary.
May I also respond to that question? The assumption that Assata is extreme is one thing I would like to address, and that's related to the question, who is Assata Shakur? Now, for many people, Assata Shakur is not Assata Shakur. She is Joanne Chesimard. She is the gun-toting, mad dog cop killer, as Lennox Hines has pointed out, which the New York Police Department at one point called the soul of the Black Liberation Army. But for other people, and from her own self-perception, she is a black revolutionary standing within a long and proud African-American tradition that began with the first slave revolts, a liberation tradition. So I think it's very important that we begin to look at Assata from the perspective of how she defines herself, and also put into perspective what she says about the use of violence. She has said that it is not something that we use across the board, but something that at certain times in history and certain places is justified. And as Lennox points out in his excellent foreword, we understand and support people of El Salvador, for instance, in their struggle for liberation. Why can we not look at the black liberation struggle in the United States from the same perspective?
The proceeds from the book, will they go to Assata? Will they go to help Assata and her revolution, as she calls it?
Well, I have no way of answering that question. The reason being that Lawrence
Did she write
Hill
the
and
book to make
Company.
money?
I do not believe that that was her primary motive, although I personally and Lawrence Hill and Company cannot answer the question about proceeds, because we are not financially involved with Assata Shakur. We have a contract with Zed Books of London, and they have the copyright to the book.
But there's a reason for that, isn't there? The Son of Sam laws of the United States state that you cannot, a person who is a convicted criminal cannot write a book and profit from it. Is that the reason why the British company was brought in, was able to get the money to her?
Well, only, perhaps Lennox could answer this question,
Well,
because only the lawyers related to Assata Shakur can answer this.
I don't think that that was the reason. I think that Assata Shakur was looking around for a publisher, and a publisher who would be prepared to publish this particular book. And we approached the British publisher prior to approaching Lawrence Hill. And it was fortuitous for us to find Lawrence Hill, who was courageous enough to agree to enter an agreement with the British publisher to in fact distribute the book in the United States. But if we were able to identify in the first instance a publisher in the United States who was willing to do it, I'm sure that Assata would have proceeded in that way.
Well, it's an interesting topic. We've just really skimmed the surface of it all. The name of the book, if we have whetted your appetites out there and you'd like to read more, the name of the book is Assata, The Life of Assata Shakur, her autobiography. Lennox, Shirley, we appreciate you both coming on our show and airing your views.
Pleasure's mine.
Thank you very much.
And we'll be right back.